Hey there. Hey, Philip.
Hi, Donny.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, wonderful. I see your office is almost as, well, almost. It probably is as empty as mine is at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Welcome to the Wednesday afternoon, slightly delayed show today, but you had a really good reason for delaying it. Always meeting with investors are always a valid
Priority.
excuse. Yeah, exactly, for not being on time. So thank you for joining. Anyone joining now? My name is Donny. Every Wednesday, usually 2:30. Today, 3 p.m. I go live with another cool person or tech or company, or usually a Kinder egg of all three. And I'm happy today again to say and see that we have all three here in the Kinder egg of Philip Skogsberg. Ta-da!
Ta-da. Pleasure to join you.
No, cool. So, Philip, Challengermode is the startup that you co-founded and that you work with today. So just give me, in a nutshell, brief presentation. What is Challengermode?
Yeah. So Challengermode is an esports platform. The company was founded back in 2014. And usually what I say is that we're building esports infrastructure, meaning that we enable tournament organizers on the one hand and gamers on the other hand to come together on one platform. So Challengermode is a platform where you can go in and create a tournament. You can sell tickets to those tournaments, and then you can invite other people to join and play those tournaments in some of the most popular and biggest computer games around. So games like League of Legends and FIFA and Counter-Strike and also many more games now.
Okay, so and that was then I'm guessing that you filled a gap in the market there when it came to actually enabling this meeting between the organizers and the players.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we started out focused a lot on the idea of just providing a kind of 10x better gaming experience for esports players, because the way that you used to do it sort of back in the day, or still today in many circumstances, that it was a very manual process. You had to either go to a physical LAN, like a gaming center or something, to play in competitions. Or if there were gaming competitions online, you would usually have to take a screenshot and you would have to report it to a administrator. And so this was all of these sort of very involved, kind of nerdy way of doing things. And it wasn't scalable and it wasn't user-friendly compared to other services that we're used to using, like Spotify or Netflix or something where everything is just on demand. So, we thought that being kind of heavy gamers ourselves, at least back in the day, it was possible to create a much better competitive gaming experience outside of the game itself. And that's really what started us on this journey. And then working on this, we built a very robust tournament system and realized that there are other people who might want to use our tournament system as well. And because we had everything very well designed and automated, we just lowered the threshold quite a lot for what it means to be able to organize a tournament, how to organize a tournament, and also how to play in those tournaments, of course.
Yeah. And I know that one thing that you've been talking a lot about as well is let's call it the democratization of gaming as well. Now that gaming has become a much bigger thing. I mean, esports has become a much bigger thing, also lowering the threshold. And okay, I read an article that your co-founder Robel wrote on when he did a comparison with soccer.
Yeah.
And any kid can pick up a ball, play soccer, join some kind of a little league team, and then that's part of a context and an ecosystem of teams and leagues, and then there's kind of a way to become a pro.
Exactly.
But that infrastructure doesn't exist or didn't exist in esports and gaming in the same way, right?
That's absolutely right, and that's kind of the other side of the coin, or maybe one part of the coin is that, aside from just having like a better gaming experience, it's also very important that people know, and by people I mean gamers, broadly speaking, know that there is a path to the pro scene or a path to wherever they want, because as you said, if you want to start playing soccer football or basketball, there are usually systems in place. There are associations. You can play in when you're a kid. You can start playing in those kinds of teams. In college, there are college associations and teams, and then all the way up to the pro scene. And there's a path and a structure in place, and that's something that we wanted to enable as well. So we have a whole system on the platform that kind of certifies and makes it possible for organizers to become part of that ecosystem as well, because we're not the ones creating the tournaments and the competitions ourselves, right? We're just the platform.
Yeah. So, and when you say organizers, what could that mean? I mean, who could be an organizer? What is that? Just a definition.
Good question. We use organizers very broadly. There are some more traditional tournament organizers. These are companies which some people may have heard of, like DreamHack and like ESL. And there are also tournament organizers these days who are brands or other kind of media companies, or other companies in other industries, such as Hewlett-Packard, who promote their hardware and the things that they sell to gamers by organizing tournaments on Challengermode, for example, all the way down to somebody like myself, or somebody living in their mother's basement, just creating tournaments for their friends. So it's like the whole spectrum of people creating tournaments.
Yeah, and I mean, would you encourage more companies to like enter the esports arena by becoming organizers, or how does this work? I mean, what do you want to see happen in there?
Yeah. No, that's definitely part of the kind of the future that we envision. Again, about making it a lot more accessible and lowering the thresholds to either competing in esports or also creating esports competitions and gaming competitions more broadly. So that could mean, if you're a company who is interested in marketing yourself, advertising, or reaching the kind of the gaming audience, so that's people between like 13 and up these days. Actually creating competitions is a very good way to do that, because it's not really seen as traditional advertising. You're not putting something in people's faces. It's like, hey, play in our competition. We got a cool prize pool, or it's some other fun format, and it's just branded by them, or otherwise kind of has their logo on it in some fashion. So I think that's a perfect way for brands to get into this as well.
It's a bit like big brands putting their name on a stadium almost.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, okay. So I know we're just saying esports and we're just saying gaming, but I mean, for anybody out there that might not know what we're talking about, when we say esports, I mean, how do you define esports? I mean, what is your definition of it? Where do you put the, the?
Let's go back to basics. So I usually talk about esports by thinking about it in a couple of concentric circles. So you have all of the gamers in the world, right? And today that's maybe like 2.5 or more billion people actually who play some sort of game that's like Candy Crush on their phone, chess online, to, of course, hardcore computer games on their PC, and then everything in between. And then within that, you probably have maybe like 1 billion or so people who play online games, or like computer games, so multiplayer games and things like that. And then I would say there are maybe 400 or 500 million people who participate in esports or watch esports. So that could be people who sit on Twitch or YouTube and watch gaming competitions. And then kind of all the way down to maybe a handful or a dozen thousand or so people who are actually professional esports players. And so these are people that play for a living, and they make money for a living playing in teams. And then that kind of comes back to the definition of esports. So if you think about sports, there are teams, associations, there are the leagues and tournaments and that whole ecosystem. And the reason it's called esports is because we have that exact same thing based around computer games as well these days.
But I mean, that's some echo here. That's some really big numbers as well that you just mentioned. I mean, a lot. I mean, it's the whole gaming thing has become both a lot wider and more spread, but also a lot sort of narrower and more professional. I mean, like any like any new sport that sort of comes up, like snowboarding or mountain biking, whatever, starts with this small nerdy thing, and then it sort of spreads to like everyone, and there's the mass market movement, and in that as well there's a very sort of narrow like elite as well. I mean, I guess that the same kind of development we've seen here in the esports development, I guess.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It was a very underground kind of thing. It was people did it in it's actually started back like in the 70s and 80s in arcades, like pinball tournaments and those sorts of simple games. And then with the introduction of, I think it was Quake and then Counter-Strike in the late 90s and early 2000s, that's really when online gaming started to become a bigger thing, and the first tournaments started happening. There was like a $100,000, a $50,000, $500,000 prize pools, and then it's just escalated from there. And then it really took off in, I think, 2010, 2011, when Twitch, the streaming platform, kind of hit the mainstream, and the whole streaming infrastructure, broadcasting infrastructure on the internet was mature enough to be able to watch, live video at that point. And then since, and the rest is history, as they say. So yeah, a couple of 100 million people actively playing or watching esports today, and it's growing, 20-30% year over year or something like that.
It might be an obvious question, but when it comes to the last sort of 10 months with living with COVID and Corona, have you seen like a massive increase in gaming, or what have you seen as well there?
Yeah, so we can count ourselves lucky in that sense. Being in this industry, there was quite a big influx of players and organizers especially back in the spring, when literally everybody was at home. So it's been largely positive for us in the sense that we were already very well positioned as an online platform to help organizers. And of course, actually, a lot of tournament organizers, even though it's online games, they actually did or do physical events. And of course, they are not able to do those these days now. So they've had to figure out ways of moving a lot of their business online, or figuring out, online only events. And that's basically what we've built our platform for. So that's been very good in that sense. And we're happy to help people as much as we can with, selling tickets to esports tournaments or what have you.
Challengermode.com. So where do you see yourself, or where do you see let's see, this is like a multi-level question here. Where do you see Challenger Mode, the coming 3 to 5 years, and where do you see the industry in the coming 3 to 5 years? I mean, they're very closely entwined, but it would be just a reflection on what you see happening now.
Yeah. Well, so with the risk of sounding like a little grandiose, the way that we envision esports and Challenger Mode is a future where there exists a place for literally anyone to be able to create very simple competitions in almost any game that they would want to do. This could be everything from a casual online game to a hardcore esports title. As long as there's a competitive element, you should be able to organize your events around it. It's a way where these people can communicate and socialize with each other as well. So again, it really comes back to building this kind of fabric, the underlying infrastructure for the whole esports ecosystem. And as a result, we believe that we can also expand the definition of what people consider esports today, and the way that businesses and people in esports are able to make money and make a living doing what they love. So, in the same way that, let's say, somebody like PewDiePie or very famous YouTubers, they don't have to build their own streaming platform. They can go to YouTube and they can build an audience and they can make a living providing content and entertainment to that audience. And Challenger Mode is doing the same thing, but for tournament organizers. And when it comes to playing and participating in esports. And I think that's that ability for people to make a living or actually build a profitable business on esports is something that's missing today, and that's kind of the thing that we want to enable long term.
Yeah. And what about the industry as a whole? I mean, the esports industry. I mean, you mentioned it was like a 25% growth, you said, annually.
Yeah.
Do you see that continuing as well?
So it's been growing like that, or even more, revenue wise, at least over the past couple of years. And I think, of course, at some point it might, it's an S curve, so it's probably slowing a little bit. But I think, as with many new kinds of markets, the way that the market is defined early on probably shifts and changes a little bit over time. And so with the things that we're doing as a company, I think the definition of what is actually defined as esports is going to grow. And that in itself is something that's going to change the definition and also the growth trajectory of the whole market. I think that's what we envision if we are successful in the future with what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because when people they think about esports and they, some people, they like sneer at it and they say, well, it's, just computer games, and what's so sport about that, that kind of thing. And I always sort of just think back, but we've been watching people play chess competitively for like, hundreds of years. I mean, in the big tournaments in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and it was just like two people sitting opposite each other moving chess pieces, and that's cool. So I mean, it's just a matter of how we define things and how we perceive things. And for me, it's the same. It's of course it's a sport. I mean, if chess is a competitive game, then this is as well. I mean, there's no distinction between those two. I mean, it's
exactly. No, I mean, you can actually. Personally, I don't care very much if people want to argue about the label. Whether it's a real sport or not. But there's definitely a competitive element to it. There's a team element. There's often a strategic element. Some computer games such as a Dota or League of Legends, they have as deep a strategic element to the game as American football or other sports like that. Of course, there's not necessarily as much of a physical component, although I would argue that if you're playing at a very high level or intense games, you're going to get very sweaty. And so yeah, it's sort of different, but also very, very similar in many ways. And as I said, again, like the whole industry now is, you see all of the same kinds of stakeholders come up, as you have in regular sports. So it's already kind of happening, whether or not people think it's a real sport doesn't really matter, because people are watching it and playing it. And I think those are sort of very, very basic human drives. If you can get good at something, if something is hard and there's a way to get a lot better, then you're going to want to compete, and you're going to want to measure yourself against other people. And if you are like a newbie in that game, or if you're a fan of that game or activity, you're going to enjoy watching other people play who are really good at it.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree with you. I mean, 100%. Two more questions before I let you go, and we're trying keeping these Wednesday afternoon Innovation Fika breaks with me, Donny, and guests here as well every Wednesday on LinkedIn. Kind of short. So two more questions, and one being, you mentioned welcoming organizers and helping people get into gaming. What about game developers? I mean, how does it work on that side? I mean, do you continuously sort of opening up for new games, or how does that work? With which games do you pick, or are how does that work?
Yeah, great question. That's maybe the third stakeholder in our ecosystem as well, alongside gamers and organizers. So the difference with sports and esports is that nobody owns football per se, or hockey. There are associations that have some sort of frameworks built up, but nobody owns the games. And of course, with computer games, you have IP holders who actually own the game title and everything around it. And so that kind of changes the dynamic. So what we're doing now at Challengermode is that we're trying to help game developers and game publishers build their games as an esports. So that means that they can integrate their games with us, either when they launch the game or after they've done that, and they can then tap into our whole ecosystem with tournament organizers and brands and players and either monetize their games directly. They can host, World Cup championships or whatever you might want, or they can allow the gaming community themselves to actually run games, run tournaments in those games. So it's a very flexible kind of framework. But the whole idea is to enable game developers to actually kind of esportsify their game if that's what they want.
But that's actually a really interesting offering for a game developer to be enabled by Challenger mode and actually reach an audience through Challenger mode and a monetization as well. I mean, that's actually, that's a really interesting prospect, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's we don't make the games ourselves, so it's really important for us to have great relationships with game developers and publishers, and I think we've been pretty successful with that so far. We are working with some of the largest game publishers, such as Games and Electronic Arts and others.
Cool. All right, then. One final question that I have to ask. Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Challenger mode. There is a connection. What is the connection between Challenger mode and Zlatan Ibrahimovic?
Zlatan Ibrahimovic invested in our company, I think, back in 2017 or 2018, and has continued as an investor along with a few other people. That's the connection.
That's cool. I mean, that's also, that's kind of a figurehead investor when it comes to sports, the alignment of the sports as well. So, well, I don't know how often he visits your offices, but say hi next time he comes by, and
I'll be sure to do that. He's actually a big gamer himself. He used to, I think he still does play a lot of computer games, and he has invested in a few other gaming companies or in this space as well. So it's not as surprising as it may look, actually.
No. Okay, cool. Ending off, Philip, thank you so much. Which is your favorite game, by the way? What do you play? What did you play when you got?
Exactly. When I have the time. So I used to play a lot of Counter-Strike when I was young. Always played a lot of like Battlefield, those sort of shooter war games. I think they're a lot of fun, team-based games. And these days, I mainly play some strategy and role-playing games, sort of just to relax a little bit. I'm not good enough to play competitively, and so I'd rather not get my ass handed to me, if I'm allowed to use that word.
Well, you're definitely the elite when it comes to building the supporting system for gamers. You can say that at least.
That's where I spend my time. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's time well spent. Philip Skogsberg, Challenger mode, thank you so very much for joining me for my Innovation Fika here on the Wednesday afternoon. And for everyone out there, this will be on LinkedIn and on YouTube in a future close to you as well. And for now, and with that, I will say thank you very much. I'll sign off, and thank you, Philip. Good to see you again.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. Great talking.
Wonderful. It's been great seeing you again. Take care. Bye.
Bye.